It's that time of week once again where you are at the innovation's edge with myself, Trigger Jordan, and my co-host, Dan. Hello, Dan.
Hey, what's up, Trigger?
Always, every time. On the Disruptive AF podcast, listen, could not be more excited this week to be welcoming with us Kathy Reid, who is the Spark Cell lead for the 96 Test Wing at Eglin Air Force Base. Now, the wing has experienced exponential growth in their innovation culture under her coaching. That's a fact. That's not even a question. She has been actively involved in the AFWERX innovation ecosystem and event attendance since its inception. And not only that, Dan, but also she's incredibly passionate. I'm talking about her like she's not here with us. She's literally here with us, but she's incredibly passionate. And it's about inspiring airmen to relentlessly pursue their ideas, to exceed their expectations, and enable them to leave a legacy that defines the future of the Air Force. Boom. What an intro. Kathy, welcome to the Disruptive AF with us.
Oh, so excited to be invited to just get to talk to you guys about some of the things that we're doing. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So first off, I mean, yes, we had the background, but it's kind of the first question we start with. When did this whole innovation thing start with you? The culture, the mindset, the activity with it, where were you before this kind of started? What was the mindset? And then what got you into this?
So I guess all my life I've kind of felt like people thought I was different. I never thought like anybody else, right? I always had that out of the box thinking. But for me, the innovation side of it started. My background is computer science, software engineering, did a lot of code development, did Agile, Scrum, project management certifications, all the cool things to get you moving in your career. But I really had a passion for helping people do things that they didn't think they could do and just reaching beyond what the limits were. So in January of 2017, I got this opportunity. And the funny thing is I had been selected to be a major graded area point of contact. So I worked for the first time directly with the wing commander.
Yeah.
And I was finding things that they could do better and trying to help. And he built this position. I applied for it thinking, I'll get an interview and I'll find out what the job is like, because I've never done innovation before. I didn't know anything about it other than I'd heard the word and it sounded cool. Yeah. So I put in for it. And the next thing I get is, congratulations, you got the job. I'm like, oh no, he didn't even interview me. What am I doing? Nobody knew, right? This was even before AFWERX became as big as it is.
Yeah,
and I remember going in after, my first week there and asking him, sir, what do you need? What do you want from your innovation program? He's like, I don't know, but I know you'll figure it out. So whatever you need, let me know. And that's kind of how I got into it.
Yeah.
So
wow, that's an interesting and really kind of common story. Is this? Hey, I hear we need innovation. Can you do that?
Right. And nobody even knew what the definition of it was, right? So the first thing was try and define it. I spent 9 months and failed miserably at trying to define innovation. I finally gave up and said, I'll let it define itself and I'll let the airmen figure out what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like that a lot. Let it define itself. Let the value be what it should be. And I actually, that's something that I like to say when people ask me to define innovation, because they're like, oh, you talk about innovation all the time. Like, what, you have to define it. I'm like, no, I don't. The innovation is when you produce value and it's new for somebody. Like it can be that. And even if that's the wrong definition, producing value is a good thing to do, right?
Yes, that's right. Well, and even thinking along the lines of when we were first starting, I told people no one can really give me a good definition, but when they see it, they know it. They're like, that's innovative, right? So there's the hard part.
Yeah. That's completely true.
So I heard you say something in there, which is that you have a passion for liking that for other people. And I kind of want to dig into that a little bit, because I don't think that everybody gets to that place. It's almost like, I want to say it's like a stage of enlightenment on the innovation on development. Like you start off and you're frustrated, and then you want to do things yourself and you want to change things, and then you want to enable that experience for other people, and you're not quite as interested in credit. Can you talk about, do you think that came from a place of being within the software development field or something, that you have that mindset? Where does that come from?
So I think it's probably coming from a lot of different places, right? It comes from how you grow up, the experiences that you have in life, and how you recover from failure. Do you get up and try again? Do you stay down? You know, what kind of support system do you have? I've learned a lot in college. I learned a lot from my parents. I have a strong faith and a foundation there that I really rely on to, you know, kind of help me to exceed beyond what people see and have that hope. But for me, I think it just really stemmed from being able to see how when you give someone a goal that they just don't think they can achieve and you let them go after it, and they're always afraid they're not going to make it, right? Like, oh, you're setting these crazy goals. How in the world am I going to get there? And I tell them all the time, it doesn't matter if you get there. I just want you to try. Well, in the end, they get there sometimes they don't, but they're way further ahead than what they thought they were. And I've had so many people that I work with come back and say, I never would have thought I could do that. And I wouldn't have tried if you'd not pushed me. And so that drive and having that passion and letting them fail and learn and telling them it's okay, and helping them figure out how to make that a learning opportunity rather than a failure. I think it's just the key to innovation, and it's what sparks that passion. And then once you do it for one, they like share it with all their buddies, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you're not going to believe what just happened to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to, it's so funny. Like, I promise you to our viewers, we did not give her any talking notes. We didn't tell her any of the things we talk about on I swear we don't. Like, this is all natural and organic. But I hear you saying these things, and literally we just got off the phone with Christian, who we were shooting the previous podcast with, just got off the phone. And there was three principles that basically, as he was talking about, that keep on coming up in this innovation environment. And it's investing into our people, empowering them, and releasing them. And it's so funny to hear you talking about enabling people, is because this falls right in line. As I hear you talking, it takes an investment in pouring into people of almost reassuring them, listen, it's okay to fail, but we're going to do this together. We're going to get through. You got to try, you got to do it. And then enabling them to do it and releasing them and letting them do it. It's just, it's amazing. Now, I say these things as it comes up from podcast to podcast about the investing, enabling, releasing them. But is that something intentionally you did, or is it a framework that you initially started with? Because you and I have never, we've never talked about this before. No. But was it something you intentionally set out that I'm going to put more focus on the individual than I am on the project? Because this is leading to a really important point here coming up in just a second.
Yes, I did. My full mantra the whole time has been, I'm going to put the airmen first. I'm going to give them whatever they need. So when I first started, there were some individuals that had some ideas, and their leadership were not supportive of them, but they really felt passionate about them. Yeah. So, I just went and talked to the commander about them. And then I go back and talk to him and say, hey, I talked to them. Oh, you shouldn't have done that. My bosses are going to be so mad at me, and they were worried about getting in trouble. So I kind of said, hey, you know what? If this happens, you just tell them, that crazy Kathy, I was talking to her in private and she took that and ran with it. That was not my intent. Blame it on me. Let me take the fall. You know, and if it's great, then you did it. It's all about you. Yeah. And just being there, that they had someone that would be willing to do that, I think made a big difference. And it helped as I was going forward and getting them to see. So realistically, the biggest challenge we have in the Air Force is there are too many perceived obstacles, and it stops airmen from even trying. So we kind of went after, we're not going to be the innovator. So the first challenge I got was people would call me with ideas and say, hey, go make this happen. Here's a great idea. And I'm like, I'm not the innovator. It's the person with the passion that does the day-to-day work that's the innovator. I enable you. And so I would come back and say, oh, I can't wait to see what you're going to do with that idea. And they're like, what? What? No, I just told you about it. I'm like, no, we're going to help you. Because I want to teach them how to effectively and positively and professionally overcome those obstacles. Because once they learn how to do that, they don't need us. They don't need the spark cell, and innovation's just going to go rampant through the Air Force.
Yeah.
I love that message.
Yeah, go ahead.
And it's something that I am constantly shouting about, which is this idea that innovation cells should not just be project factories. They should be enabling those projects to happen where they're producing value, which is at the level of execution. I saw it really early on when I was trying to figure out how we were standing up our innovation cell at the 70th Wing, and I saw a lot of cells kind of just collect a couple projects, and then suddenly they have no man hours. Like, if you're trying to manage a project and you're involved in them, you're an innovator, but you cannot be an innovator and an enabler full-time at the same time. It's
Yeah.
impossible.
Yeah.
Well, and I told the story. My first 9 months, I went into a couple of the AFRL think tanks, and I spoke. And I talked to them about how miserably I had failed the first 9 months, because I kind of took that first approach of, I'm going to go out and sell it. It's a great thing. I'm here. I'm passionate. I'm excited. I was a cheerleader, right? But what I heard from the commanders was, hey, we're busy. We want to do this, but we can't. There's no bandwidth. We can't get past our basic mission needs. How in the world are we going to do this? I'm like, but you're doing it all the time. So I talked about 80% of our squadron commanders. That's the first 9 months. I went and saw everyone personally, talked with all their leadership. The message I heard was, hey, I don't have time. One of them even said, can I tap out? And I thought about it for a second, and I thought, yeah, you can. But I'm going to build the football game you don't want to sit on the bench on. You're going to be asking me to be put in. So I went back to my office and waited for the phone to ring. Nothing. Blank. And I'm like, all right, I got to build something, like Daniel says, of value. So I started building the wing innovation site and trying to, my computer scientists, get all the data together, make it easy for them, take care of some of their pain points. People told me, you have no people, you have no money. I was by myself, only person in the office. Yeah. And within a month, I just got blessed enough to have General Goldfein say, I'm going to give you squadron innovation funds. Well, guess what? I suddenly had money. And within a year, that same person that asked to tap out called and said, can you come speak at our commander's call? I'm like, sure. What do you need? He goes, I want you to talk about innovation. We're going to do it. So there you go. Put me in, coach.
There's a line that is literally our mission statement for the Advanced Spark Cell, but it's something that, Dan mentioned a couple of podcasts ago, that when you're passionate about it, you just can't help but share. And it's the statement that this is not just my life's goal, but it's like, it is so applicable everywhere, is that if you spend your time, my focus and our focus in our specific Spark Cell is to connect people to their passion for a purpose to create fulfillment in their life. And there's been several times, we had the chance to brief the vice chief who came through, and the undersecretary of the Air Force. And when it's so funny, when you throw these things up on the slide, I know exactly what the reaction is going to be. They're going to be like, whoa, that's the fluffiest mission statement I've ever heard. But the reality is that you're exactly right. I don't care about the project. I care about the person, and I care about getting the right person. If you get a person in there, if they have 2 hours a week to spend on something, but you connect them to a project that they are 100% passionate about, they are going to find time to be able to make the thing happen. Our only job is to release them to be able to do it, and resource them if we have the resources available, and encourage them to be able to do it. And what I've seen it create is exactly what you're talking about. It creates this environment where people are literally fulfilled in what they do. They love working in innovation. They love working in their squadron because they're bringing these solutions that people have been frustrated about for years.
Yes.
And it's something different. It's something where they actually love what they do. I mean, I've actually seen people the year prior, they were 100. I was one of them. I was out. If you'd asked me 3 years ago, I was out of the Air Force. You couldn't have done it. You couldn't have. It's not about the pay. I was so far out, you couldn't have stopped me. And it's not the case anymore. I mean, I love it. And there's several people like that where their stories align with that.
Yes. And I think the biggest thing I found, in the 24 months I've really been, if you don't count the failed months, we'll go ahead to the 24 months I've actually been highly engaged, is that the airmen themselves, they really are searching for someone to just listen to them.
Yeah.
And so, I've always thought, hey, God gave me 2 ears and 1 mouth. I should be listening twice as much as I talk. So I started, instead of letting them speak and go, oh, they're being negative, oh, they're not involved, I started really listening to what they were saying, because 9 times out of 10, they were telling me a pain point if I would just listen so that we could connect. Because you're right, it's all about connecting. And we did the same thing. We would have, General Goldfein came through, and the wing commander said, I'm going to give you 40 minutes with them. I want you to brief our program and talk about it. And I thought about it. I said, sir, if it's all right with you, I don't think he wants to hear from me. I think he wants to hear from the airmen that are doing this. So I picked 5 of our innovations, and I brought those airmen in. I let them brief the chief of staff of the Air Force on their project. That was so phenomenal to them. They were so ecstatic. They couldn't believe they'd had that opportunity as a staff sergeant or an airman or a 22-year-old civilian, being able to do that was pretty phenomenal.
I heard you say something like, did you say 24 months you've been in the role?
Yes, it's actually been about, 2.5 years. I came
Okay.
in January of 17, but that first year, I didn't make much progress at all, to be totally honest. I tried really hard, but nothing.
Yeah,
But
no,
that's a beautiful transparency of what
yeah,
innovation is.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's really important, and something that's really important in this podcast for me is that we don't just focus on this like paint a pretty picture kind of thing,
Yeah.
because innovation is messy, right? And
Yeah.
there's a lot of failure involved, and there's also a lot of emotional like low points, right?
Yes.
And it's important that we capture that so that people who are going through that don't have the sense that I'm doing it wrong.
Right.
Like there's a way to get out of that, but that's an inevitable experience that everybody who's trying to produce value is going to have to get through. And so that's the importance of community. The other thing I wanted to hit on, which is like I have this thing with the innovation cell that I helped to stand up. I was there for 8 months, right? So, and we had just stood it up. So we had, I'd say, mostly failure. And and we were starting to feel like, okay, here's where we're going to produce value. And then our whole office turned over, the
Yes.
entire office.
Yeah.
So the new guy got, shout out to Master Sergeant Harbin, is basically blank slate because he doesn't have that basis that we had kind of built up, because it's also based on those personal connections that you have, right?
Yes.
So I think that there's a lesson for a lot of these innovation organizations, and I don't know exactly how to solve it for people who don't have that continuity that you're talking about, like being able to be in one place and really hammer away at this for 2.5 years. I like a lot of those Spark cells. They got people just working part time, and they're there for maybe a few months and they're gone.
So that was the thing that scared me the first when they first started standing up the spark cells. Tony sent out the list the first time, and I looked at it and I said, "Tony, should I be worried? I'm the only civilian on this list.
Yeah.
Everybody else was military, right?" I'm thinking I'll
Yeah.
be replaced soon, and I was failing, so that wasn't helping. But yeah, continuity is important, and I will say my team has turned over a lot, and the reason it's turned over is the relationships I have with the squadron commanders and group commanders. They see what my team is doing, and they want that in their unit. So what they're doing is they're pulling them, right? They're offering
Yeah.
you promotions and jobs,
Yeah.
which is great. The innovator in me goes, "Hey, I got seeds everywhere now. Go for it. Keep getting them,
Yeah.
right? I'll keep training them." But
Yeah.
it's just how you look at it. It's not a negative thing to me. It means that
Yeah.
we're putting more innovative thought out in the field.
Yeah.
Before we cut away to break, Dan, you had mentioned celebrating the failures, and not even just the failures, but the trials and the frustrations you go through in building that. And I remember, Kathy, you talk about your 9 months of failure. I'd say there for me, it was about 6 months in there where innovation was not what we were doing, what we were working on, because I'm a T6 instructor. Because of the amount of effort and energy it took to really invest into standing this thing up, I almost felt as though like I was a hated person because I wasn't cranking out as many student sorties. Like you look at the flying hours during the week, it's like, oh, triggers at the bottom of the flying pole again, doing nothing, the innovation bug. And it's like, no, I'm not kidding,
Right.
man. I felt like an ostracized, hated dude. Like I almost didn't want to go to roll call because I knew that it was like people were going to be mad at me because they thought I was just slacking and not doing anything. And it wasn't until you start seeing the benefits and the help that you're able to bring to these units that you actually start seeing the mindset shifting, and the mindset shifting around where they don't look at you as just a liability of something that's wasting their time, but instead they look at you as an office that is in a program and people that are actually able to help them. And I've seen the same mindset shift. I've seen that same turn where at first I was having to beg for anybody to be able to help. And now you have commanders coming and say, "Hey, man, here's my top dude. Do you have a spot that we can get him into the Spark Cell?"
That's exactly what
Which
we've
is
seen.
just a total. I mean, it's
5
awesome.
people
I
from
love it.
one. Woo, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, it's huge. Hey, so
Build
when
it, they will come.
it couldn't be more true. Couldn't be more true. Hey, we're gonna go break real quick, just for a little bit. Make sure you come right back here to the Disruptive AF podcast, where we are at the edge of innovation each and every day with our guest this week, Kathy Reid, the innovation extraordinaire herself. Stay right here on Disruptive AF.
Are you listening to this podcast and wondering what you should do to get started? Join AFWERX weekly office hours call to hear about different resources and programs available to you and the rest of the defense innovation community. Tune in at the link in the show notes every Monday at 1 p.m. Central to hear more.
Hey, welcome back to the Disruptive AF podcast. I'm here with Trigger Jordan and the inimitable Kathy Reid, talking about running a Spark cell for the last 2.5 years. We covered some good content on failure. It's good to talk about failure at least a little bit. Maybe we should transition to successes. Can you talk about some of your favorite things that you've seen come out of the Spark cell? Some of the stuff that you're proudest of having enabled your airmen to do?
So yeah, the hardest part about this is there's so much to talk about, right? There's the phenomenal things, there's the lower things. I mean, we've made it to the Spark tank with ideas, making it to the semifinalists 2 years in a row. Haven't figured out how to make it to a finalist yet, but we're challenged for next year. We've done things like we've had over 180 ideas. So you're asking me to pick, right, a few out of that. So some of the ones that come to mind are, I kind of picked, in my mind, 3 areas, right? We have those game-changing impacts I'll start with. So the coolest thing we had was early on, we had security forces patrolmen come in and say, hey, I would like some money to be able to put iPads in our cars so that I can get our background checks through the car and not have to go through dispatch and have them run it and then read it back over the radio while I'm sitting there with someone detained that I don't know anything about them. So we got to thinking, it's like, well, is that really innovation, right? I mean, that's kind of just we have that already. It's out in the industry. And so we said, you know what? There's this system that AFRL's developed called ATAC. It was an Android tactical assault kit. It was a Blue Force tracking system with a digital footprint, if you will. So we said, I'll tell you what, we'll buy the iPads for the vehicles if you will just look at this tool and see if you could use it. Just assess it for us. And they said, all right, we'll do it. So guess what? They did. Within 2 weeks, they came back. AFRL had provided them access to the tool, devices to start with. They changed from iPads to tablets, and the functionality it gave them was just light years ahead of what they were doing. They had maps up on a board with a plastic cover using grease pencils, doing cordons when they had a fire or something at base, and they're over the radio trying to tell people where to go and trying to figure out where people were at. This system allowed them to get all of that digitally, instantaneously, post out, hey, here's what's going on. Here's the cordons. Here's where I am. Here's pictures. And they kept saying, well, you took us from what we've been doing for 70 years the same way, and you have just catapulted us. We've had over 40 bases call that airman and say, how did you do that? And we want it. Even security forces centers looking at it. So, that's one of those game changers that it's made the world of difference. And those airmen in the MEOCs and in those control rooms are like, I want to come to work again. It was just phenomenal.
I'm going to have to hit you up about that afterwards, because I don't think our SF has that, and we need to hop onto the goodness of what you're talking about. That's awesome.
Well, and it's expanded. So it didn't just go to them. So our fire department came and said, hey, can we get some? Because while we're in the fire truck heading over to the fire, we can get situational awareness in the truck and hit the ground running. We've had our EOD. We are looking at it for the COVID stuff, right? Temperature screening and things like that at the gate to be able to have touchless entry. It's just, it's endless what we can do with some of these things.
And this highlights for me something that, I like to say that 90% of innovation is actually just making connections. And what you're talking about is an innovation that already existed, right? It was a technology that had already been developed. And unfortunately, technologies get developed all the time that never make it to their ideal use case, right? It's, the stuff that maybe wasn't developed specifically with a customer. And this is the case in commercial technology all the time. We got stuff out there people have developed. They got a theory that it could help the Air Force, but how do we connect that to users? And I think it's really important for people to understand that in order to enable innovation, part of that can just be to serve as a connector, to be tied into those networks where you're learning about the technology that's happening, and then make sure that you're telling the story about, hey, we just created this thing, so that other people can hear oh, they're doing this thing over there, and we've been doing this. Like we just saw it right now with Trigger being like, hey, we could maybe use that, and it's not the main purpose of doing this podcast is to connect the hosts with the guests for innovations. But
dude, you hit on probably the point of the century. I feel. Let's just pause for a second and have a little praise break of how good of a point that is. You're 100% right, man. And when the connections is the connections in the network. When I honestly think about when people say, "Oh, Trigger, what are you good at?" I'm just a network dude. Literally,
yeah.
I know people.
That is literally it. I find people. I know people. I know people who can find, and there's nothing special in me. It's just the connections that you have of building the relationships. And if you're able to build those relationships and get the people connected to the right people they need to, it literally changes the entire game. I mean, it changes everything about it. And I think the reason why, and this is just kind of, pontificating on the idea, but I think one of the reasons why people in the innovation realm are so fulfilled, as I'll go back to my example of connecting people to their passion for a purpose, create fulfillment in their life. Why they're so fulfilled is that people love connecting. And they love celebrating the victories, and they love working through the failures, and they love connecting. And when you think about all of the people that are in this innovation network, it's a bunch of people who get to talk to other people who are excited about what they do. I mean, how could you not love what you do in that environment?
Absolutely.
And that's what we find is that, that's the kind of the second point I have is that it's the growth and passion of the airmen across the wing. So when they see that, they start connecting with others. And it's just like this exponential growth curve that happens because our security forces got touted by Security Forces Center as one of the most innovative security forces units they'd ever seen. That one idea sparked so many other things. They now have augmented reality weapon simulators for their training. So they were looking to get a Milo or a Megget. And I'm like, you're thinking too small. Don't try to catch up. Leap ahead, right? So I said, go to augmented reality, go to virtual reality. And then they started doing it like, oh, you're right. This is 100% better. So it's just those things of don't think so small, think big, right? And that was a lot of what we did. We kind of took General Goldfein's thing of start small or think big, start small, scale fast, right? So that's kind of what we've tried to do.
Yeah. And that reminds me of something you spoke to earlier, which is that it's not about the ideas, it's about the airmen. That reminds me of this thing from Chief Ian Eishen's TEDx that he did, the command chief out at AFWERX Air Force Base. He talked about how they accepted all ideas, and they accepted them and they treated them basically all equally. We're going to work on that idea and we're going to find the value in it because when you are just looking at ideas, and that, I started off my career shouting about innovation with kind of talking trash about the Spark Tank because I didn't like that competitive element. I was like, when you're just looking at ideas and you're just throwing them away, you lose people. Like if an airman comes to you with an idea and you're like, no, you lose that airman. So it's really important that while you're also trying to create value with the ideas, you recognize that person is a key component for your future going forward. And if you don't respond to them in a way that keeps them engaged, you're not going to last very long if you're only looking at ideas.
And that's one of the other cool successes to me is, so we had a similar scenario, right? So I didn't ever want to tell anybody no. I took that word out of my vocabulary. And then I would hear people say, well, let's, we'll do yes, but. And I said, no, how about we do yes, and? Because I didn't want to contradict them, right? I wanted to expand them. So we had someone come in, and my big thing was we took all ideas. We threw nothing away unless it was going to get the commander locked up. I thought that probably wouldn't be good on my resume to get him put in jail. So we actually had a idea that came up, and they wanted him to purchase a bus for some things with our school age on base, and he couldn't legally do it. So I worked with them, and I kind of thought, oh gosh, I had to say no. And it really bothered me for a long time. And a few months later, I got an email from the individual that brought the idea up, and she said, I just want to say thank you. I could not have done what we did without innovation. I'm like, you're thanking me. I didn't get you the bus. She goes, no, but you connected me with so many other people and we solved it. And it's amazing the solution we came up with, and we didn't need a bus. So it's things like that. Even a no can be a really positive experience if we lift up those airmen and give them what they need.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of my things that I always want to do for people is when they bring me an idea that I know has flaws. I've actually had this in meetings before where I was like, we don't say in this, it's like design thinking, or we're doing a session where we're just gathering ideas. We don't shut them down, because when you do that early in an exercise, people start to hold back. They have that, there's an involuntary psychological response to having your idea criticized when you first put it out there, that if you're just welcoming and you're like, no, yeah, that's great, let's keep exploring this, and then you let them go through the journey of discovering where the value is, or even finding out that it never produced value anyways. They had a learning experience. Exactly. They came to that conclusion on their own, and you didn't lose that connection in the process. And they, like you said, they make connections, and the person gets value out of it, and the innovation community gets the person.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's where the Spark Cell really becomes a valuable asset, right? So what we do is we have once a month, when we first started, we did these weekly. The ideas were flowing in. So we would bring them in, and I had a panel. The panel was made up of the wing commander, myself, our chief scientist, our finance person from both O&M and the T&E side. And then we also had a squadron representative. And I transferred that every week. So somebody different in a squadron came, because I wanted them to see what happened in the room. Well, sometimes when we had our chief scientist and he couldn't make it, he would bring the next, higher technical people up. And I actually had to get to the point that I did not allow some of them in the room anymore because of that exact thing. They came in and all they wanted to talk about was all the, they think technically, right? These are all the things that are going to stop you. And so we can't do this. And I even trained them before. Don't say no. Don't tell them the obstacles. They know we're going to help them, because we give them innovation coaches. That's one of the things we do different in our Spark Cell, is every idea that comes through. I have a team of 4 people. 2 of them are innovation coaches, 2 are CPI, and they go and they work with the innovators so they never stay stuck for long. So they're always moving them along through the process and finding out what their pain points are. So I actually went to the wing commander and said, sir, it's all right with you, I'm going to say that there are certain people that can't come anymore. And he said, nope, it's your program. I'm fine with that. So that's what I did. And I said, unless you can come into that room with a whole different attitude of how do you get them where they want to go, then you're not really suited for this iSpark. That's a hard thing to do. These are all people much higher level than me.
That reminds me of the conversation we had last episode with Christian Breckbuell, where he talked about they were doing the what's the electronic flight bag, and he found out we don't have to connect to the network right away. If he had come to them with a solution that included all the components that it would eventually have, he would have gotten a whole lot of people who said no. Which is why I think it actually makes sense to take that technically specific mindset out of those initial stages, and why we start with problem development, like with problem definition, because if you can get to the heart of what the problem is, then you can start to explore all the avenues, which some of them might have technical blockers, some of them might have policy blockers, but if you got to the heart of what the value is you were trying to create, you've made a lot more space to explore those other avenues with room to develop in.
And I think another area that I've seen, and this is the kind of the third tier of that I was talking about on successes, is I am really excited about the opportunities that senior leadership has brought to the table for innovation, right? The fact that they've given the airmen a platform to pitch their ideas through Spark Tank, through the IMSC Rodeo. They've stood up AFWERX to be able to have events where we can get together and get connected with other bases, and they've provided us with those types of things, squadron innovation funds. And there's so much more, right? The list goes on and on. Dr. Roper's providing us with all kinds of rapid acquisition avenues that people never thought possible. You look at COVID and some of the things that are going on, senior leadership is stepping up and they're saying, hey, let's build task teams. Let's put the innovators on it. Let's get them involved, because they want the speed. They want the scale to the need. They want to scale to the requirements and being able to do things quickly. So I just think all of that is really cool to be a part of right now. And that senior leadership buy-in is critical for a Spark Cell who's trying to really make a difference, because they're the ones that are going to really market it and sell it. And they're the ones that the airmen are going to listen to. And they're the ones they want to spend time with. So when the Spark Cell can be at that level, because I'm right under the wing commander, the way we're situated, and it is a full-time position, and I have a full-time people on my team. But again, that grew. The first year was just me. The second year I doubled. And then last year they brought in 3 more slots just because our volume is so high.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah, and that's actually a pretty, I'd say, I guess, standard growth, because the first year was me, and then second year was me, and then I had a group, because I was at the wing like you are. Then I had one chief per group that we had. And then the third year, we hired in a civilian for the continuity, because continuity is a serious, I mean, Dan, going back to what we were talking about, continuity is a serious concern when you talk about, the amount of projects, and especially projects, as you have projects to succeed, it goes from being a wing funded project to the numbered Air Force funded project, because you get the other bases that have the similar mission on board. There's a lot of management that goes into it. And as you do it, you don't just become an innovation person, you become a contracting person and a finance person. And I mean,
Amen.
I
Right?
did not expect. I'm a lowly pilot that shouldn't be allowed to speak finance or contracting or any of those things. But it's the nature of what's required when you talk innovation. If you want to see these things succeed, you're going to have to step into the roles and the bounds that aren't fun, and stepping into the contracting and learning that lingo and understanding what the different colors of money are and how we can spend it and what does that look like, and where's the wing going, priorities, stuff like that. But it's not where it starts. It starts with the idea. And Dan, going back to what we talked about in the last podcast with Christian, just get going. Just get started.
Yes.
Just don't try to build Rome in a day. Just get going. And you will be afforded the ability to expand and grow as you continue showing value to your organization and you continue bringing those ideas. Hey, there's one. Yeah, go ahead, Kathy.
I would say right now we're operating at about 20% of our squadrons that are, actively innovating. There's just multiple innovations going on. And one of the cool things that's happened from that is I have people from those units, like you said, a chief in every area. Yeah. I have airmen now coming to me and saying, I want to be a part of your program. Yeah. We have tenants at Eglin that are coming and saying, I want to be a part of your program. So I'm getting individuals that are willing to take additional duty and do this on their own just to learn and be a part of that. So that's been really cool too. And that's just started happening in the last 5 months.
Yeah, that's huge. Amazing. There's one thing before we close out that I want to hit on that is a challenge. I think, and again, we talk about transparency here. Like the challenges we're actually facing is that as you have these airmen come in and they get used to working in this environment. For example, I have an airman now that his enlistment is coming up, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to get out. I'd love to stay in this innovation realm, but the system doesn't allow me to do that yet. Like, there's not an innovation Sherpa or innovation guide or like an innovation consultant, AFSC or anything like that for me to continue working in." And even within the constraints of what the AFSCs are, when you have a title, that's who you are. That's your job title. Now, I've seen it such that there are several people working on major projects, not just across the Air Force, but in areas where it doesn't matter what your AFSC is. Like, I'm a pilot at 11R. What would I have to do with writing an application or anything technologically if you looked at my qualifications? Like zero. But it has more to do with the job experience. How is it that we move forward with these people who their natural, like what their fulfillment is and what they're passionate about isn't necessarily aligned with what their qualification is? How do we keep these people engaged past their interaction with us at a Spark Cell? Does that make sense?
Yes. So
like, how do we keep them going? How do we keep them engaged and moving forward if this is what they love?
So we've had Spark Cell, people that have been a part of our Spark Cell leave and go get PCS to theater or whatever. And they've asked me that question, Kathy, how do I do this? And I said, well, they can't take your connections away from you, right? They can't take away the fact that we all work on a different level than anybody else. I don't know about you guys, but I'm a 24/7, right? My phone's dinging at 10 o'clock and Tony's texting. I'm right there, and everybody's
my
like,
wife
do you
would
ever
love
sleep?
To stab you for that statement, but it's so true. It's like dinging, ringing, doesn't matter. Something's always happening.
And so, I said, so while you may not be able to be a part of what you've been here with this innovation program, innovate what you can innovate, because the hard thing is leadership can't argue when it works. And like Daniel said, when you're bringing value and all of a sudden they start saying, hey, how come, Joe's bringing value every time I turn around? And they'll finally go ask him. It might take 3 or 4 iterations and he'll be like, I'm using innovation and let me tell you about this network. And then he may be the spark that starts there to build what we've built here in a place that hasn't embraced it just yet.
Yeah. And this question really speaks to me because I went from, those 8 months of failing pretty successfully at, my last wing up to now I'm in a space where I'm not in an innovation role, but I'm still doing a whole lot of extra stuff just on my time. And also, I like to sneak in during work hours and try and produce value that way. But it's the reason that I'm so obsessed with creating those online networks and continuing to be present in those spaces. It's why we stood up the Innovators Mattermost group. It's why I'm a part of the Defense Entrepreneurs Forum. And it's why I stood up my latest project, Project Agitare, which is to connect people who are doing those facilitated services, like with design thinking, human-centered design, warfighter-centered design, because what I realized is that I can't keep pushing without people there next to me to like keep, kind of push me or encourage me or help me through those rough moments. It is not a solo sport. It just isn't. When you're playing this game with as much sort of cultural inertia that we have to push against in a lot of places, you need that community. And so, I just encourage anybody out there who wants to stay part of this. There are places online where we're staying active and we're trying to build those spaces for people so they can get the encouragement to keep going.
Yeah. Man, that's a perfect segue into how people can get connected. But before we do that, before we close out, just want to go around the horn real quick and give our final shout outs. Kathy, what's one of the things you want people to know? What's the thing you want people to know before we leave here today in regards of getting connected to innovation, getting connected into organization, the mindset you can do it. The floor is yours. We'll go around. Dane, you're up next.
So I'm going to start just before I get to my final thought. I want to give 5 tips for innovation spark cell leads. These are things that I've just come to learn over time. And I've kind of mentioned them throughout, but I think it's good to kind of put them into that bullet list, right? The first one is put the airmen first. Listen to what they have to say, because we need to be the enabler that they need so desperately.
Yeah.
Second, take every opportunity you have to speak to high-ranking individuals to pull them in. Get their innovations in the forefront of the leadership, because they want to see what their airmen are doing. So let them tell their story firsthand. Third, tell the story. And when you tell your story, don't be positive all about, tell about the failures. Talk about what you learned and how you overcame things, because that's the real meat of innovation. And that's what truly makes innovation what it is the things that we learn from our failures. And then we said it, connect. Call complete strangers. I called Tony for the first time. I saw AFWERX, want to know what it was. I saw his name. He's like, how in the world did you get my number? And where are you? And he couldn't believe that I was just this person sitting out there, been doing innovation for a year, and had first connected with him. So make those calls. The last one, and this is really key, you're going to feel uncomfortable most days. Please embrace that feeling as a key attribute to success. And you want to build those close, strong relationships with squadron commanders, group commanders, and wing commanders, because in the end, if you maintain your legal, ethical, and moral integrity, they're going to have your back. And so you've got to trust that and just do it. So my last thought is this. Circumstances beyond our control are really redefining every aspect of our lives right now and how we interact. I challenge each airman to use the experience to redefine how they view our future Air Force. Start making those disruptive changes that focus on the value of time, of urgency, of scalability in everything we do. There's no place that can't do innovation. I don't care what you do. And you know what? Now's the time to do it, and we got to do it together. So I'm all in, and I want them to be too.
Yeah, that's huge, man. That's a mic drop.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't want to talk now. No, that's so much good stuff. I'm like so excited about this episode. The thing that I heard that like resonated most with me is that when an airman walks into your office, into your spark cell, or into your, your innovation, or if you're like a flight chief, if an airman walks up to you with an idea, you need to pay attention to the fact that it's not just an idea walking in the room. It's a person.
Yeah.
And the way that you respond to that, it shouldn't be at the risk of that person walking out the door, because they gave you an opportunity when they said, I trust you with this idea. They give you an opportunity that they will be an asset in the future. They're the kind of person who's going to come to you with ideas, right? So the way that you respond to them in that moment is critical. They might never come to another flight chief again for the rest of their career if you respond the wrong way. So it is all about responding in a way that helps them build that idea, helps them find the value in that idea, and also that the next time they have an idea, they're like, that was a good experience. The last time I had a terrible idea, it was great. I think I want to have more terrible ideas, because having a lot of terrible ideas, that's how you have good ideas.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Man, couldn't not be more true. Kathy, thanks so much for joining us here at the Disruptive AF podcast. Seriously, it was a blast. Every time we shoot an episode, I say, how could it get more fun? And then it does get more fun. It's wild.
Yeah.
Every single time. Man, well, Dan had mentioned earlier the way of getting connected, because honestly, innovation is so much about getting connected and networking. And we want to network with you literally right now. So you can go to all the social media platforms we have, not only Facebook, also YouTube, several different areas with AFWERX and the Disruptive AF podcast. If you've not subscribed yet on the YouTube channel, make sure you go over to that logo right over there if you can see it, and make sure you hit the bell, and that's going to allow you to get this awesome, great content each and every week with every content drop we have. And finally, this podcast, you can listen to it anywhere podcasts are available, not only on iTunes, Spotify, but also Radiohead and several other places. So make sure you stay connected with us right here at the edge of innovation on Disruptive AF. Guys, we will see you later. Kathy, thanks so much again.
Loved it. Have a great night.
Love it. Dan, we'll see you next week for another episode of Disruptive AF.